Tolla and Giuseppe Lignano.
Principals and founders.
And we've been here in this location in New York for the last
15
years. We also have an office in Naples that we and we work with both locations.
We have between 10 and 15 people working with us at any given time. The studio fluctuates, but we've never gone above that between the two offices.
We've been teaching at Columbia for almost 10 years now. We taught at Parsons before, and now for the first year we're teaching also at MIT, lecturing there tomorrow.
It's a creative endeavor that has a lot to do with looking at the world we have around and modifying it, imagining it and transforming it. So it's a continuous game where you start from what's out there and constantly learn to look at things not for what they are, but for what they can be.
We definitely see architecture as possibly the three-dimensional art. We definitely come from an art background in the way that we trained ourselves after school, after our studies. We were much more interested in looking at the work of contemporary artists than contemporary architects for a long time. And mainly for two reasons. One, the freedom that our contemporary artists seem to enjoy in inventing their own universe, their own world, and but also in the way that contemporary artists filter our culture, our civilization in a very creative and very propositive way.
In the 15-20 years we've been in New York, we've seen it from a moment that was really static as far as architecture, where there wasn't much being built, or rather there wasn't much being built of a certain relevance. There was a lot being built that was very anonymous and nondescript, where you wouldn't know who was building what. And then instead, right now, the moment where the big names of architectures are actually entering the city with the developments on 10th Avenue and the Frank Gehry and the Shigeru Ban and the Diller Scofield and Renfro and so on and so forth, like all the big projects that have come into the city. But it's always an interesting point to understand how much you can build that need and that desire that architecture can add to just construction and the need of construction to bring it at the level of the architecture with the capital A.
We all know, we architects all know what the role of architecture is. We understand the significance of architecture. We understand how the three-dimensional art of all the arts is able to affect people's lives, affect the economy, affect everything, and be affected by everything. I think what the very important point that Ada is making is that we know all of that, but people don't know all of that. We set up this practice totally basing it on innovation. The idea, very much like kids, very much like kid inventors, people that want to look at the world with different eyes and invent a new reality. And for us, we felt very enthusiastic about what we were looking at. A dimension, as Ada was mentioning before, that very much is all that is man-made, everything that is part of what we've been calling an artificial nature that proliferates on this planet despite of us. So we've been observing that reality that goes from the existence of the shipping container, of the airplane fuselage, or antennas that grow on buildings, or highways that cut in the middle of nowhere.
The level of experimentality goes also in the fact that some of the objects we use are not in the manuals of materials. So you have to really have the experience and the will to think about how is this object going to respond structurally, or how is it going to respond thermally, and so on and so forth. You have to be willing to enter that whole new paradigm to be able to respond and think. And sometimes it fails. So also for the engineer is a learning curve. But for us it's really interesting how this touches everything. So it's as artistic as it is real, as it is about responding to code, or responding to precise physical condition, gravity, and so on and so forth.
Networking for us is everything, it's vital, of course. On the one hand, again, as I was saying before, there is one type of network that we have established, which is with the people, the companies that deal with the objects that we love to deal with, both at the beginning, meaning they make them, they construct them, and they distribute them, but also people that receive them, you know, the graveyards where an airplane fuselage ends and how they cut them up, or the depots that accumulate the containers and what they do with them, and so on and so forth. And that's really a network that we have established, you know, definitely domestic, but also quite international. On the other side, of course, there is networking in terms of, you know, making what we do relevant, reaching people that are important, that we think are important for us to go to in terms of, you know, again, talk about the relevance about what we're doing, and therefore the possibility of new projects, new adventures, new creations, and new problems that we can take on and keep pushing what we do, you know, kind of by using these opportunities to make what we do grow and develop.
Of course, the internet is immediately tied to the global network, right, which is also tied to the whole idea of globalization. And it's always, again, a very interesting place. And I think for us it's also very relevant, because I think that our work is immediately linked somehow to issues of globalization, right? We work with objects that are dismissed, that generally, you know, like shipping containers are everywhere. They're like the origin and the result of globalization at the same time, right? Of the global exchange. Airplanes, the same thing. I mean, many of the systems or networks or transportation networks or services are pretty much global, or almost. There's something about this global spreading that is very interesting, that has a lot of potential. At the same time, it's also very daunting, right? It's the reason why everybody's terrified, and the word local is very important. So how do you ride that edge, right, between local and global?
The school of architecture that I would recommend somebody to go to doesn't really exist. I've had in my head the idea of a school of architecture that is very different from the school of architectures that are out there. I love a lot of them. I love working at Columbia, but the reality is that I would like a school of architecture that would function much more like the school, like film school mainly. I believe that you need to have a very strong theoretical, artistic, and also practical, technological education, and then understand where your interests and your abilities lie more.
Somehow the belief that, as Giuseppe was saying before, to find your place within the field, to find your place within the discipline, you need to be able to really be in touch with yourself and understand what your talent is, what your interests are, where you want to go. I mean, the advice that we always give to our students is you really want to try to ask yourself these hard questions, because you're going to be stuck with that for the rest of your life, and you want to try to do something that you're excited about.
The toughest thing
in the world, but it's also the most exciting. You know, it's again the side of the coin you look at. I cannot imagine anything different in a way. If I think about it, I think I'm so proud that we did what we did when we did it.
It's always very, very, very painful, I think, to always be able to, really kind of gather that territory, expand that territory of action where you can work. Again, because I think that architecture is so not very, very, very important right now. It's getting a little bit more there, but it doesn't have a very ample environment to work in, and the possibilities are always very limited. So there is a lot of work. So it's you need a lot of determination. You need a lot of talent, a lot of determination, but you also somehow need to know how to make it work. I really thought that the two were enough, right? I mean, having talent and being determined and being there every day and doing it was enough, but what I've learned is that you also need to know how to make it work, and I don't know what that is and what that means. It's the ability of doing what you want to do, and how do you express your own talent in your own way, but you make it work.